All right, so the federal eviction moratorium has officially expired. It expired on July 31st. It's now August 2nd, and we are already seeing literally thousands of these evictions that were being held up by the moratorium starting to take place and are underway. And listen, I've seen estimates ranging all the way from 4 million all the way up to 11 million people that are now at risk of being thrown out onto the streets in the middle of a coronavirus spike that we have been seeing with the Delta variant. So it's a completely ridiculous situation. But the point that I want to hammer home in this video is not only is it ridiculous, but it was also entirely predictable and entirely preventable. So I want to show you some of the details as to how we got to this point, who's responsible. Hint, it's corporate Democrats, namely Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, and Joe Biden, who not only allowed this to happen, but wanted this to happen, especially somebody like Nancy Pelosi, who we know is worth over $100 million, has tens of millions of dollars in real estate holdings. It's no surprise why somebody who is literally a millionaire landlord would not really give a shit about this eviction moratorium expiring. So first off, we had this happen about a month ago. Just to give you some context, the Supreme Court basically ruled that the CDC or that Joe Biden could not extend the eviction moratorium past the July 31st deadline. Now, this seems really arbitrary to me. It doesn't really make any sense to me why you would set an arbitrary cutoff point at July 31st. It's not as if any of the underlying dynamics changed. It's not as if people don't need these protections anymore. It just doesn't make any sense why you would arbitrarily end it at this point. So Joe Biden could have still pushed for executive action on this front to try to extend it. And instead, he basically just stayed completely silent for weeks and weeks and weeks after this ruling came down. And then, as pointed out by our friend Jeff Stein here, after weeks of silence, the White House, and this was days before, literally this was July 29th, so just a couple days before, after weeks of silence, the White House is now saying, just 3 days before the eviction moratorium expires, that they want Congress to extend it, but can't themselves. And his reporting suggests no senior officials in the White House were pushing for an extension even before the court ruling. So now they're coming out at the last minute, and they were like, oh, well, we're going to try to pass the buck on to Congress. Well, it's like, you could have been trying to do something this entire time. It's not a secret. It's not as if this snuck up on us. Everybody knew that this expiration date was coming. You could have pushed for it, and you chose to wait 3 days before it was going to expire before you say, okay, Congress, I really need you to do something about it. So it's complete a shirking of responsibility here from Joe Biden to pretend as if he never had any power to act on this. He absolutely did. He chose not to. He chose the side of allowing millions of people potentially to be thrown out onto the streets. So let's be very clear. This is not something that snuck up on them. They knew this was coming. They made the decisions that they made, okay? And now continuing on, here's what Nancy Pelosi had to say about it after the eviction moratorium expired. This is just an absolutely mind-numbing statement here. Ensuring every American has a roof overhead is a value that unites the Democratic Party. That's why I led a relentless campaign to extend the CDC eviction. A relentless campaign? What did you do? What did you do? I didn't even hear you come out speaking about this a single time over the last months that we've known that this deadline was on the table. She comes out, a relentless campaign? What the fuck are you talking about? She continues, campaign to extend the CDC eviction moratorium in an act of pure cruelty. She's actually going to blame the Republicans here. In an act of pure cruelty, Republicans blocked this measure, leaving children and families out on the streets. So what is she talking about here? So this relentless fight that she's talking about, that she supposedly did here, what she's talking about is she put forward a unanimous consent vote, okay? So she put forward a vote that she knew was going to fail. All it would have taken is one single person, Democrat or Republican, and believe me, if it wasn't a Republican stepping up to the place to strike this down, it would have been a corporate Democrat. But she blames the Republican Party for this. She put forward a vote that she knew damn well 100% was going to fail. A unanimous consent vote, that's your relentless fight, is saying, well, I hope nobody in Congress objects to this maneuver. What the fuck? That's not a relentless fight. That's a joke. You're not even really pretending to put up a fight here, let alone relentlessly fighting. So completely absent leadership from both Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi. Where the fuck is Chuck Schumer? I don't even know where the fuck Chuck Schumer has been. Haven't heard anything from him recently, but they're just completely lying about this entire dynamic here. Again, even when you control the House, the Senate, and the White House, Democrats are still blaming Republicans. I mean, how much more pathetic can you get than this? And to point out how much of a lie this is, we have our friend Jake Johnson here from Common Dreams. Contrary to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's claim on Friday that we only learned about this yesterday, this is what she actually tried to say. She tried to say, oh, we only learned about this recently, so of course we can't maneuver our way to get a vote going. You knew about this months ago. So contrary to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's claim Friday that we only learned about this yesterday, lawmakers have been aware of the looming eviction crisis since at least June 29th, when the conservative dominated Supreme Court signaled that it would likely toss out any attempt to keep the moratorium in place beyond July 31st. So you knew that this was coming. You could have acted on it. You could have whipped your party into shape and done something about it. You chose not to. That's not a relentless fight. Stand by your policy positions at the bare minimum. She doesn't even have the balls to do that. Continuing, when the CDC extended the ban for the fourth time on June 24th, the agency said that this is intended to be the final extension of the moratorium. So the CDC came out and said, we're not going to do it. And the Supreme Court said, Congress has to do it. And Nancy Pelosi is coming out here saying, well, we didn't know about it until the last minute. The fuck you didn't, you liar. Continuing, in a statement on Thursday, just 72 hours before the moratorium's expiration, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki pointed to this June Supreme Court ruling as the reason that Biden administration could not act on its own to extend the ban. And the next day, lawmakers scrambled to build support for legislation that would extend the moratorium, but the effort collapsed amid opposition from centrist Democrats and Republicans. So they're trying to blame Republicans for all of this. Understand, if it was not Republicans trying to object to this, corporate Democrats 100% would have. They are controlled by the same interests that a lot of these Republicans are. There's absolutely no way that the entire Democratic Party would have circled the wagons around this naturally without somebody at leadership at the top whipping them into place. It just would not have happened. There are a million Democrats I could think off the top of my head that would side with the Republicans on this issue. And so they didn't put up a fight whatsoever. And on top of this, so not only was this a failure of leadership to step in and try to do something about it, but here's the dynamic. We have a pandemic, right, where that forced people out of their jobs. Maybe they lost pay, maybe they lost hours, forced people out of their jobs. So they fell behind on rent. No fault of their own. Could have happened to anybody. And instead of providing them with the assistance, this is the situation that we have right now with our rental assistance being doled out by the federal government. So NBC News contacted all 50 states and the District of Columbia about their emergency rental assistance program. So there was a program that was put in place that was nominally like, okay, well, we're going to try to get rental assistance to people who, whether you lost your job or any other situation, you fell behind on rent through no fault of your own, we're going to try to get you assistance. Well, here's how it's gone. So they contacted all 50 states about their emergency rental assistance program, and analysis of the responses from 41 states found that 26 of them, an overwhelming majority of them, had distributed less than 10% of their first allocations, although several programs had just begun distributing money in June. So we have a situation where people are falling behind on rent through no fault of their own, through the economic consequences associated with the pandemic, because the government didn't step in and protect their jobs in the first place. So they fall behind on rent, and now the programs that were put in place in order to help them with rent, less than 10% has been given out to people. So you're putting people in a position where they didn't even do anything wrong. They didn't get the federal assistance that you promised them. And now you're going to lift the moratorium on evictions and allow a wave of evictions of people who, again, through no faults of their own, were put in this position and given no help from the federal government. So it's an absolutely disgusting and despicable situation that we have right now. Cori Bush has actually been leading the charge, literally sleeping outside of the House of Representatives in protest of the allowing of this to take place. But listen, I mean, I don't even know what kind of steps we could take at this point in order to fix the situation, because it's already lapsed. So it would take a fuck ton in order to bring everybody back into Congress. They're going out on vacation right now, right? Nancy Pelosi, Kyrsten Sinema, Joe Manchin, they want to go off on their vacation. Cori Bush is standing on the steps of the House of Representatives saying, bring everybody back. Let's at least try to get some sort of a vote on some sort of protections for people. And Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden, the entire Democratic establishment is absolutely nowhere to be found. So we're facing a massive wave of evictions coming right now. And I really don't look forward to seeing how this is going to play out.